The fog came down from the mountains carrying the smell of blood. Nobody in Crow's Hollow wanted to believe what was killing them. Not until it was too late. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me where you're watching this story from. The fog rolled down from the Appalachian peaks like something alive, something hungry, something that had been waiting in those mountains since before the town existed. It filled the valley where Crow's Hollow sat, an old town that time had mostly forgotten, where the mountains pressed close on all sides like giant hands cupped around a secret, and the nearest highway was 40 miles of winding road through forest so thick the sun barely touched the ground even at high noon. Population, 283 souls, give or take, depending on who was visiting relatives or who'd moved away for work, but still claimed the town as home. Make that 282 now. Maybe fewer, if you counted right. The town had been there since 1847, founded by coal miners and loggers who'd seen opportunity in these hills and carved out lives from rock and timber. Main Street ran straight through the center, lined with buildings that remembered better days. Earl's General Store with its creaking wooden floors, Betty's Diner where the coffee was always hot and the pie was always fresh, the post office that doubled as the town hall, and the First Baptist Church, where Reverend Marcus Stone had preached for 30 years to congregations, that grew smaller every season as young people left for cities and opportunities that Crow's Hollow couldn't provide. October in the mountains meant cold mornings and colder nights, meant leaves turning colors that looked like fire in the afternoon light, meant the smell of wood smoke from chimneys and the taste of winter coming soon. It was beautiful country if you liked isolation, if you liked knowing your neighbors, if you liked the kind of quiet that settled over everything after sunset and didn't lift until dawn. That quiet shattered on a Thursday night when Deputy Tom Richardson didn't come home. Tom was a good man, the kind of person small towns are built on. 42 years old, married to Linda for 18 years, father to 2 boys who played football at the regional high school. He coached Little League in the summer, helped with the church fundraisers, never missed a PTA meeting. He'd been deputy for 12 years, worked under Sheriff Billy Maddox, mostly dealt with drunken disorderlies, domestic disputes, the occasional speeding ticket on Route 47 where the road straightened out, and people forgot they were still in a 35 zone. His patrol car was found at 6:47 a.m. on Friday morning by Martin Hughes, a trucker making a delivery to the lumber mill. Martin came around the bend on Route 47 and saw the car sitting sideways across the road, lights still flashing, passenger door hanging open. He slowed down, pulled over, got out expecting to find Tom helping someone with a flat tire or dealing with a deer strike. What he found made him run back to his truck and call 911 with hands shaking so bad he could barely hold the phone. The driver's door wasn't just open, it was gone. Ripped clean off the hinges and thrown 30 feet into the ditch on the far side of the road. Metal twisted like it was aluminum foil, like something had grabbed it and just pulled until it tore free. The windshield was worse. Blood smeared across it in streaks and handprints, still wet enough that it ran when Martin got too close, and his breath condensed on the glass, still red enough that there was no mistaking what it was. The interior of the car showed signs of a struggle. Radio torn from the dash, steering wheel bent, seat ripped, stuffing coming out in white tufts. And on the driver's seat, on the floor, on the dashboard, more blood. Too much blood. More blood than any person should lose and still be alive. Sheriff Billy Maddox arrived 12 minutes later, driving too fast, his own lights flashing, his face pale even before he saw the scene. Billy was 58 years old, had been sheriff of Crow's Hollow for 30 years, had seen car accidents and hunting mishaps and one memorable bar fight where Jake Peterson broke a pool cue over his brother's head, and everyone agreed it was mostly deserved. But he'd never seen anything like this. He stood there in the cold October dawn, his breath coming out in clouds that the wind tore apart and scattered, his hand resting on his service weapon like it might do some good, like the little .38 special on his hip could protect him from whatever had done this. It wouldn't. He knew that already, knew it in his bones, in the churning of his stomach, in the way his hands wanted to shake, but he forced them still because he was the sheriff, and people were watching. Sheriff? Deputy Jim Harris stood behind him, young face pale as milk, trying not to look at the blood, but unable to look away. Harris was 24, fresh from the police academy, full of ideas about justice and protecting people, ideas that were crumbling right now as he stared at what was left of Tom Richardson's patrol car. We need to find him. We need to find Tom. Billy nodded slowly. Couldn't speak yet. Couldn't trust his voice. He walked around the car, careful not to disturb evidence, even though he already knew no crime scene investigator from the state police would be able to explain this. The tracks in the dirt shoulder told a story he didn't want to read. Human boot prints, Tom's had to be. Running from the car. Then something else. Prints that started out looking almost human. Almost like bare feet, but too big, too wide. And then they changed. Became something else entirely. Something with claws. Something that ran on 4 legs for a while, and then 2 legs, and then 4 again, like it couldn't decide or didn't care. Deputy Harris, Billy said, voice coming out rough like gravel. Call it in to state police, then get the search and rescue team assembled. We need to find Tom. Yes, sir. You think he's... I don't know what I think. Just make the calls. Harris went back to his cruiser, radio already in hand. Billy walked to the edge of the road where the tracks led into the forest. The tree line was maybe 10 yards from the asphalt, thick with pine and oak and underbrush that hadn't been cleared in decades. The tracks went straight in, no hesitation. And even from here, Billy could see broken branches, disturbed leaves, signs of something moving fast and violent. He didn't want to follow, didn't want to see, but he was the sheriff, had been for 30 years, and that meant doing things you didn't want to do. It meant walking into darkness because nobody else would. He followed the tracks. 50 yards into the woods, the trees grew so thick they blocked most of the morning light. The air was colder here, damp with rot and earth and something else, something copper and raw that made Billy's stomach turn even before he saw what was ahead. The tracks were easier to follow now, torn earth and broken saplings, like something had dragged or carried a heavy weight without caring about the path. Billy made it 60 yards before he found him. Tom Richardson had been a good man. Past tense now, all past tense. Billy turned away fast, hand over his mouth, and his breakfast came up hard and violent, splattering on his boots and the leaves and the ground. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to be the sheriff this town needed. But all he could see when he closed his eyes was what was left of Tom Richardson, what had been done to him, and his stomach heaved again even though there was nothing left to bring up. He heard Harris crashing through the underbrush behind him, heard the young deputy calling his name, and Billy straightened up fast, held up a hand. Don't, he said. Don't come any closer. Is it Tom? Did you find him? Yeah, I found him. Billy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, tasted bile and fear. Call the medical examiner, tell them we need body bags. And Harris? Yes, sir. Tell your wife you love her when you get home tonight. Tell her extra, okay? Harris looked confused but nodded. Okay, Sheriff, I will. Billy waited until Harris was gone before he looked back at what was left of Tom Richardson. He needed to see it, needed to catalog it, needed to remember because this was his town and these were his people, and whatever had done this was still out there. The wounds weren't from any bear. Billy had seen bear attacks, seen what they did to livestock and dogs, and one memorable time to Roy Henderson, who'd gotten between a mother and her cubs. Bears mauled. They bit and clawed in a frenzy of territorial rage. This was different. This was deliberate. The claw marks were too deep, too precise, like whatever made them had taken its time. And the bite marks, Billy forced himself to look closer. The bite radius was all wrong for any animal he knew. Too wide, too many teeth. Wrong shape entirely. More than that, the tracks around Tom's body told a story that made Billy's blood run cold. Boot prints, human boot prints mixed with the animal tracks, like whatever had done this had walked on 2 legs part of the time. like it had stood over Tom, looked down at what it had done, and then walked away almost casual. Billy pulled his radio, called Harris. "Get the state police down here. Tell them we need homicide detectives, crime scene investigators, everything they got." "Homicide? Sheriff, you said it was an animal attack." "I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just an animal. Just make the calls." The state police arrived by noon. 3 detectives in unmarked cars, followed by a forensics van, followed by the medical examiner in his white SUV. They spent 4 hours at the scene, taking photos, taking measurements, taking samples of blood and tissue and hair. Billy watched them work, answered their questions, showed them the tracks, the patrol car, the blood. Detective Sarah Chen from Charleston was the lead investigator. She was in her 30s, sharp-eyed, professional. She crouched by the claw marks on a tree trunk, measuring the depth with a ruler, and her face showed nothing but Billy could see the tension in her shoulders. "Sheriff Maddox," she said finally, standing up and brushing dirt from her pants. "I've seen a lot of crime scenes. A lot of bad things, but I've never seen anything like this. You think it was an animal? I think something killed your deputy, something strong enough to rip a car door off, something with claws and teeth. But the pattern," she shook her head, "the pattern doesn't match any predator I know. It's too organized, too deliberate. So what do I tell people? Tell them we're investigating. Tell them to be careful. Lock their doors at night. Don't go out alone." She looked at the forest around them, at the shadows under the trees. "Tell them there's something dangerous in these woods and we're working to identify it. That's not going to be enough. I know. But it's all I have right now." They took Tom's body away in a black bag, loaded into the medical examiner's van, driven away down Route 47 toward the highway and the state capitol, and an autopsy that would find things the examiner wouldn't be able to explain. Billy watched them go, standing alone on the road as the sun started to drop toward the western peaks, and wondered what he was supposed to do now. The town heard about it before he made it back to his office. That's how small towns worked. Earl at the general store heard it from Martin Hughes. He told everyone who came in for supplies or coffee or just conversation. By lunch, the diner was full of people talking in low voices, speculating, spreading the story further with each retelling. By sunset, every house in Crow's Hollow knew that Deputy Tom Richardson was dead, killed by something in the woods, torn apart so bad even the sheriff had gotten sick. Billy sat in his office, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what to tell people when they came asking questions. What do you say when something impossible is killing your town? What do you say when the evidence points to something that shouldn't exist? He called Linda Richardson, Tom's widow. That was the worst call he'd ever had to make. Heard her voice bright and hopeful when she answered, "Did you find him? Is he okay?" And had to tell her no, he's not okay, he's not coming home. And then listen as she broke apart on the other end of the line sounds that weren't quite screams or sobs, but something worse, something that would stay with Billy for the rest of his life. He sent Harris over to stay with her, to help with the boys, to be there because someone needed to be there, and Billy had to stay at the office in case anything else happened. Nothing happened that night. The town locked its doors early, pulled curtains closed, and waited for dawn. 3 days passed, 3 days of nothing, and folks started to breathe again, started to think maybe it was a one-time thing, a tragic accident. Some animal passing through, maybe rabid, maybe scared, gone now back into the deep woods. The state police kept investigating but found nothing useful. No more tracks, no more attacks, no answers. The funeral was on Monday. Half the town showed up, packed into the First Baptist Church, standing room only, everyone in black or their best clothes. Reverend Stone gave a good service, talked about Tom as a husband, father, friend, servant of the community. Billy gave the eulogy, managed to keep his voice steady, managed to tell stories about Tom that made people laugh even through their tears. Linda sat in the front pew with her boys on either side, pale and hollow-eyed, looking like she might shatter if anyone touched her wrong. They buried Tom in the town cemetery on the hill overlooking Crow's Hollow, lowered his casket into West Virginia earth, while a cold wind blew down from the peaks and scattered dead leaves across the graves. Billy stood at attention in his dress uniform and tried not to think about what was in that casket, tried to remember Tom as he'd been, smiling, laughing, alive. After everyone left, after the cemetery was empty except for the groundskeeper filling in the grave, Billy stood there alone and made a promise. Whatever had killed Tom Richardson, he would find it. He would stop it. He didn't know how, didn't know if it was even possible, but he would try. That night, Sarah Chen disappeared. Sarah was the young schoolteacher who'd moved to Crow's Hollow 3 months ago from Pittsburgh, looking for quiet and a slower pace of life, looking to escape the noise and crime and endless concrete. She'd taken a job teaching 4th grade at the regional elementary school, had rented a small house on Maple Street, had taken up jogging on the trail behind the old lumber mill every evening right before sunset. She said it cleared her head, helped her decompress after days spent wrangling 23 10-year-olds. Tuesday evening, she went for her run, wore her usual outfit, gray sweatpants, a pit hoodie, bright yellow running shoes that her friends teased her about but she loved because they were comfortable. She waved to Mrs. Henderson, who was watering her garden, called hello to Mr. Patterson, who was walking his beagle. Started down the trail at 5:47 p.m., according to the last text she sent to her roommate in Pittsburgh. Gorgeous evening, wish you were here to see these mountains. She never came home. Her landlord called Billy at 11 p.m., worried because Sarah's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't answering her door and all the lights were off. Billy drove over with Harris, let themselves in with the landlord's key, found the house empty, phone gone, keys gone. But her purse was on the kitchen counter, wallet inside with cash and credit cards untouched. They organized a search party at first light. 20 men with rifles and flashlights, plus the county search and rescue team with their dogs. Started at the trailhead behind the lumber mill, fanned out into the woods, calling Sarah's name, looking for any sign. They found her shoes at 8:23 a.m. Both of them, sitting side by side on the trail about half a mile in, placed almost neatly like she'd taken them off to rest. But they weren't just sitting there. They were soaked with blood, dark and wet, and still slightly warm in the cold morning air. And next to them, in the soft dirt of the trail, were the tracks. The same tracks they'd found near Tom Richardson's body. Boot prints that changed to something else. Something wrong. The search dogs made it another 50 yards before they started whimpering, pulling back on their leashes, refusing to go further no matter how much their handlers urged them on. The men made it another 100 yards, following drag marks in the leaves and broken branches before Billy called them back. "It's not safe," he said, voice carrying through the quiet forest. "Whatever's out here, we're not equipped to deal with it. We head back, regroup, come up with a better plan." "Sheriff, that girl could be alive, could be hurt and needing help," said Frank Morrison, a farmer who'd lived in these mountains his whole life and didn't scare easy. "If she's alive, we'll find her. But I'm not losing anyone else. We go back. Now." They went back. Found Sarah's phone 100 yards from where her shoes had been, lying in a puddle of something dark. The screen was cracked, the case dented like it had been thrown or dropped. Billy bagged it as evidence, knowing already what the forensics team would find: her blood, her DNA, and nothing else useful. Sarah Chen's parents drove up from Pittsburgh that afternoon. Her father was a professor at Pitt, her mother was a doctor, both of them educated and rational and completely unprepared for what Billy had to tell them. Their daughter was missing, likely dead based on the evidence. No, they didn't have a body yet. No, they didn't know exactly what happened. No, there was nothing they could do except wait. The mother cried. The father sat silent, staring at nothing, hands clasped so tight his knuckles went white. Billy sat with them in his office for 2 hours, answered the same questions over and over, gave them what little information he had and wished he could do more. "What killed her?" the father asked finally, voice flat and empty. "Was it a bear? Mountain lion? What?" Billy didn't know how to answer that. Couldn't say what he was thinking, that it was something worse than any natural predator, something that shouldn't exist. So he just said, "We're still investigating." The parents left that evening, driving back to Pittsburgh in silence, and Billy knew they'd never come back to Crow's Hollow. Knew this place would be a wound that never healed, a name they couldn't speak without pain. The town went into shock. Tom Richardson's death had been terrible, but he'd been a deputy, someone who'd signed up for danger even if he'd never expected it. Sarah Chen was different. She was a civilian, a teacher, a young woman just starting her life. If she could be taken, anyone could. Hardware store sold out of ammunition in 2 hours. Bert Hopkins, who owned the place, had to call his distributor in Charleston and order an emergency shipment. Door locks went next, then timber for boarding windows, then flashlights and batteries and anything else people thought might keep them safe. The diner closed early. School let out at noon and didn't resume for the rest of the week. Church tried to hold a prayer vigil Wednesday evening, but only 7 people showed up. Reverend Stone and 6 elderly women who'd been attending that church for 50 years and weren't about to let fear keep them from worship. They prayed in a circle in the empty sanctuary while the sun set outside and shadows grew long across the pews. Billy doubled patrols, had Harris and the 2 other deputies drive routes through town all night, checking on people, making sure houses were locked, looking for anything unusual. They saw nothing, just empty streets and frightened faces peering through curtains. Thursday came and went, then Friday. The weekend arrived and people stayed inside, venturing out only during full daylight, always in groups, always armed. The town felt like a ghost town. Streets empty, businesses closed, fear hanging over everything like smoke. It was Saturday morning when the Morrison family was attacked. The Morrison farm sat 3 miles outside town on Route 47, a spread of 100 acres that had been in the family for 4 generations. Joseph Morrison ran cattle mostly, kept a few horses, grew corn and soybeans in the fields that bordered the forest. He was 46 years old, strong and weathered from years of farm work, devoted to his wife Anne and their 2 daughters, Emma, age 10, and little Sophie, age 6. They were good people, church-going folks. Joseph served on the volunteer fire department. Anne volunteered at the school library. The girls were sweet kids, always smiling, always polite, the kind of children that made everyone in town feel hopeful about the future. Billy got the call at 4:17 a.m. Anne Morrison's voice on the line, screaming, hysterical, words tumbling over each other so fast he could barely understand. "Sheriff, please help us, something's here. Something's in the house, it killed Joseph, oh God, it killed him. Please help, please." The line went dead. Billy grabbed Harris and they drove out there with lights and sirens, both of them knowing what they'd find but praying they were wrong, praying it was a home invasion or a gas leak or anything else that made sense, anything that lived in the normal world. They were too late. They were always too late. The Morrison farmhouse was old, built in 1923 by Joseph's great-grandfather, a solid 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and white paint that had weathered to gray. It had survived the Depression and 2 world wars and countless mountain winters. It hadn't survived whatever came for it Saturday night. The front door was smashed inward, frame splintered, wood scattered across the entry hall like an explosion had gone off. Inside, the destruction was total. Furniture overturned and broken, walls gouged with claw marks so deep they'd torn through drywall and lath and hit the studs beneath, windows shattered, curtains ripped down, family photos lying broken in puddles of blood. Joseph Morrison lay in the hallway between the living room and the kitchen. His shotgun was beside him, a Remington 870 he'd owned for 20 years. Empty shells scattered around him. He'd fired all 5 rounds plus 2 more he must have had in his pockets. 7 shots. Hadn't been enough. Billy forced himself to look, to catalog the scene, to be professional, even though everything in him wanted to run. Joseph had died fighting, died protecting his family, died doing what any father would do when something came for his children. The wounds, Billy swallowed hard. The wounds were the same as Tom Richardson's. Deliberate, precise. made by something that had claws and teeth and knew exactly how to use them. "Sheriff." Harris's voice came from the kitchen, shaking, barely above a whisper. "They're alive. The family's alive." Billy ran, found Harris kneeling by the storm cellar door, which stood open, revealing stone steps leading down into darkness. Ann Morrison was there, huddled at the bottom of the steps with her daughters pressed against her, all three of them covered in dirt and blood. Joseph's blood, transferred when Ann had tried to help him before he'd screamed at her to take the girls and run. "It's okay," Billy said, starting down the steps, hands out, keeping his voice gentle even though he wanted to scream or cry or both. "It's okay now. We're here. You're safe." Ann looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much, that would never be quite right again. She was 38 years old, and in that moment she looked ancient, hollowed out, shattered. "Joseph," she whispered. "Is he?" "I'm sorry. He's gone." She made a sound that wasn't quite a wail, more like all the air leaving her body at once, and pulled her daughters closer. Emma, the older girl, was silent and pale, staring at nothing. Little Sophie was crying quietly, face buried in her mother's shoulder. "Did you see what attacked you?" Billy asked, even though he knew the answer would be useless. Anne shook her head. "It was dark. We were asleep. I heard something downstairs, heard glass breaking, and Joseph got his gun and told me to take the girls to the cellar. I heard him shooting, heard him screaming, heard—" She stopped, couldn't continue, just held her daughters and rocked back and forth. Billy got them out of there, wrapped them in blankets, put them in his cruiser, and drove them to his own house while Harris stayed to secure the scene. Billy's wife Sarah met them at the door, took one look at Ann and the girls, and immediately went into caregiver mode, running a bath, finding clean clothes, making hot chocolate, talking soft and gentle about nothing important, while Ann sat on the couch and stared at nothing at all. "What happened?" Sarah Maddox asked Billy in the kitchen, voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. "Same thing that killed Tom. Same thing that took the teacher." Billy rubbed his face, felt stubble rough under his palms, realized he hadn't shaved in 2 days. "It's getting worse, more frequent, more bold." "Billy, what is it? What's doing this?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." The state police came back. More detectives, more forensics, same confused expressions when they saw the scene. They took photos and measurements and samples, same as before, and Billy knew they'd find the same things, evidence of something that shouldn't exist, that didn't match any known predator, that killed with intelligence and purpose. Detective Sarah Chen pulled Billy aside, away from the farmhouse, speaking quiet so the other investigators wouldn't hear. "Sheriff, I'm going to be straight with you. This is beyond anything I've dealt with, beyond anything anyone in our department has dealt with. The forensics they're impossible. The bite radius suggests something with a jaw structure that doesn't match any known North American mammal. The claw marks show evidence of partial retraction, like a big cat, but the size is all wrong. And the pattern of the attacks, the intelligence shown—" She stopped, looked him in the eye. "You need to bring in someone who specializes in this." "Specializes in what? We don't even know what this is." "I think you do. I think you know exactly what it is, but you don't want to say it out loud because it sounds crazy." Billy said nothing. Couldn't say it. Couldn't make it real by speaking the words. Detective Chen pulled a card from her pocket, handed it to him. "My uncle lives up in Vermont. Couple years back, they had something similar happen. Several deaths, unexplained attacks, same kind of forensic impossibilities. He gave me this. Said if I ever needed it." She trailed off. "I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it'll help, but right now it's all I've got to offer." Billy took the card. It was white, plain, slightly yellowed with age, just a name and a phone number, handwritten in careful block letters. Jack Holden, Hunter. "What kind of hunter?" Detective Chen looked at the farmhouse, at the blood and destruction visible through the shattered windows. "The kind you need." She left with the rest of the state police team that afternoon, promising to send her report, both of them knowing it would say, "ongoing investigation," and provide zero useful information. Billy stood in the Morrison driveway, watching them go, holding that card, feeling the weight of it in his hand like it was heavier than paper should be. His niece disappeared that night. Katie Maddox was 16 years old, Billy's brother's daughter, visiting for a few days before school started back up. She was a sweet girl, sang in the church choir, wanted to be a veterinarian, loved animals more than people sometimes. She was sleeping in the guest room of Billy's house, window locked, parents and Billy and his wife all there in the same house just down the hall. Nobody heard anything. Sarah Maddox got up at 6 a.m. to start coffee, noticed Katie's door was open, looked inside to see if she was awake yet. Found the room empty. Bed slept in but empty. Window still locked from the inside but glass scattered outside on the lawn, glittering in the morning light like diamonds. Billy stood in that room, looking at the window, the blood on the sill, the empty bed, and something broke inside him. This was his fault. He'd brought Anne and the girls here thinking they'd be safe, thinking his house would be protected. He'd been wrong. And now Katie was gone, taken right from under his nose while he'd slept not 20 feet away. He called Katie's parents, had to tell his brother that his daughter was missing, probably dead, gone like the others. Had to listen as his brother broke down crying, demanding answers Billy didn't have, asking questions Billy couldn't answer. He called Harris, called the other deputies, organized another search party even though he knew it was useless. They found drops of blood leading into the woods behind his house, found tracks, found nothing else. Billy stood at the edge of the forest staring into the shadows between the trees and knew he was out of options. The state police couldn't help, his own department couldn't help. Normal law enforcement, normal procedures, normal thinking. None of it worked against whatever was killing his town. He went back to his office, pulled out that card Detective Chen had given him. Stared at the name and number, trying to decide if he was desperate enough to believe in things that didn't exist, to call a stranger with a promise that sounded like a fairy tale. He picked up the phone, dialed. It rang 5 times before someone answered. Yeah? The voice on the other end was rough, tired, deep, like gravel in a cement mixer. Strong accent, probably Southern, probably Appalachian like Billy's own, but harder somehow, more worn. Is this Jack Holden? Silence on the other end. Billy could hear breathing, could hear background noise that might have been wind or traffic or nothing at all. Depends who's asking, said Jack finally. Name's Billy Maddox. I'm sheriff of Crow's Hollow, West Virginia. Detective Sarah Chen gave me your number. She said you might be able to help with a situation we have. What kind of situation? Billy looked out his office window at the empty streets, at the closed businesses, at the fear hanging over his town like fog. People are dying, 6 dead, 3 missing. Something's killing them. Something that comes at night, something that... I know what it is, interrupted Jack. His voice hadn't changed, still flat and tired, but there was certainty in it. How long's it been happening? First death was 10 days ago. It's getting more frequent, more violent. Next full moon. Billy grabbed the calendar off his wall, checked the date. Tomorrow night. Another silence. Billy almost thought the line had gone dead. But then Jack spoke again. I'll be there by morning. Don't let anyone go out after dark. Lock doors and windows, stay inside. Anyone who goes out is on their own. Understood? Understood, but we need to talk about... We'll talk when I get there. 3 days. I need 3 days to finish this. Can your town last 3 more days? Billy thought about Tom Richardson, about Sarah Chen, about Joseph Morrison and Katie and all the others. Thought about the fear, the panic, the way his town was tearing itself apart. It'll have to. Then I'll see you tomorrow. The line went dead. Billy sat there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, wondering what he'd just done. Wondering if Jack Holden was real or just another story people told themselves to feel safer. Wondering if 3 days was too long, if more people would die while he waited. He called an emergency town meeting. Got the mayor, the town council, Reverend Stone, the heads of the volunteer fire department and the business association. Told them he'd called in outside help, Someone who specialized in this kind of situation. Didn't tell them what kind of specialist. Didn't mention the word on everyone's mind, the word no one wanted to say out loud. "What kind of help?" asked Mayor Briggs, a fat man who sweated constantly despite the October chill. "FBI? ATF? What?" "Private contractor. Someone with experience in unusual predators." "You mean a hunter?" "Sheriff, we've got hunters here. Half the men in town hunt. We don't need—" "This isn't a regular animal," Billy interrupted. "You've seen the evidence. You know this isn't normal. We need someone who knows what they're dealing with." Reverend Stone spoke up, voice quiet but carrying. "Billy's right. Whatever's out there, it's beyond our capabilities. If he's found someone who can help, we should let them try." The council argued for another hour but eventually agreed. They didn't have a choice. The town was dying, bleeding out one person at a time, and normal solutions weren't working. Billy sent out a notice, emergency curfew starting immediately. Nobody out after sunset. Anyone who left their house after dark did so at their own risk. The town council would enforce it with fines, and if that didn't work, Billy would arrest people for their own protection. That night was quiet. Streets empty by 6 p.m. Every house locked and dark. Billy sat in his office past midnight, looking out at the empty town, and prayed Jack Holden was real. Prayed he knew what he was doing. Prayed 3 days wouldn't be too long. The moon rose full and bright, turning everything silver. Somewhere in the darkness something howled, and Billy knew the clock was ticking. Jack Holden arrived in Crow's Hollow at 6:47 a.m. on a gray Wednesday morning. The sun barely breaking over the eastern peaks. Fog still thick in the valley like it hadn't decided whether to lift or settle in for the day. His truck rolled down Main Street slow and quiet, despite the engine sounding like it might give up any second. Old V8 that had seen better decades, muffler held on with wire and prayer. Tailpipe dragging sparks when he hit bumps. The truck itself was a Chevy, maybe from the late 80s. Black paint faded to primer in long streaks along the hood and fenders. Rust ate holes in the wheel wells. Duct tape held the passenger mirror on, and the windshield had a crack that ran from corner to corner like a lightning bolt frozen in glass. But the tires were new. The lights all worked, and the engine kept running no matter how bad it sounded. Billy was at the diner when he heard the truck pull up outside. He knew it was Jack before he looked. Something about the sound, the timing, the way the few people on the street stopped and stared. He stood up from his booth, left his coffee half-finished, and walked outside. Jack was just climbing out of the truck, moving stiff like everything hurt. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", and lean in the way of people who forget to eat sometimes, who burn more calories than they take in. Somewhere in his 40s, hard to tell exactly, with dark hair going gray at the temples and in his beard, which was trimmed short but not neat. His face was weathered, lined, tanned in that permanent way that comes from years in the sun and wind. Eyes were dark, brown, or maybe hazel, hard to see in the morning light, but they moved constantly, scanning the street, the buildings, the mountains visible beyond the town. He wore boots that had walked 1,000 miles, caked in dried mud from places Billy couldn't name. Jeans worn soft and pale from washing, patched at the knee. Flannel shirt in dark red, sleeves rolled to his elbows, showing forearms marked with scars, some old and faded, some newer, pink and raised. Over it all, a leather jacket that had seen better days, scratched and scarred, patches sewn on in places, one sleeve darker than the other like it had been replaced. "Sheriff Maddox?" Jack's voice was the same as on the phone, rough and tired. Billy crossed the street, hand extended. "That's me. You're Jack?" "I am." They shook hands. Jack's grip was firm, calloused, the handshake of someone who'd spent his life working with his hands. Billy felt calluses on Jack's palm, ridge of scar tissue across his knuckles. "You want coffee? Breakfast? You must have driven all night. I want to see the attack sites, starting with the most recent. No small talk. No pleasantries, straight to work." Billy could appreciate that. "My house last night, my niece—" "I know. You told me on the phone, let's go." They drove in Billy's cruiser, Jack silent in the passenger seat, watching the town roll past. Houses with boarded windows, businesses closed, empty streets, fear visible in every locked door. "Town scared," Jack said. Statement, not question. "Yeah. Good. Scared people stay inside. Staying inside keeps them alive." Billy's house was on Elm Street, a modest two-story built in the 50s, white siding and green shutters, maple tree in the front yard dropping leaves that Sarah had been meaning to rake. Billy parked in the driveway, led Jack around back to where Katie's window was. Glass still littered the lawn, sparkling in the weak morning light. Jack crouched by the largest pieces, studying them without touching, then looked up at the window frame above. Window was locked from inside? Yeah. But glass is outside. Means something pulled her through, broke the glass outward. Jack stood, walked closer to the house, examined the sill. Blood there, dried now, dark brown. He pulled a small flashlight from his jacket, shined it on the blood. Not much, she wasn't wounded badly. It grabbed her fast, pulled her through before she could scream. How do you know she didn't scream? Because you were inside. If she'd screamed, you would have heard. You didn't hear anything, did you? Billy's throat was tight. No. Jack moved to the woods behind the house, found the blood drops, the tracks, crouched there for a long time, just looking, his face unreadable. When he stood, he looked grim. Werewolf. 3 of them, I think, maybe 4. There it was, the word Billy hadn't wanted to hear, hadn't wanted to believe, spoken casual and certain, like Jack was identifying tire tracks or boot prints. You're sure? I'm sure. Been hunting them 20 years. I know the signs. Jack started back toward the cruiser. Show me the other sites, all of them. They spent the morning driving to where Tom Richardson died, to the lumber mill trail where Sarah Chen disappeared, to the Morrison farm. At each site, Jack did the same thing, crouched, studied, examined, barely spoke. Billy watched him work, watched the way he read the tracks like a book, the way he measured claw marks with his thumb, the way he smelled the air and the ground like he could detect things normal people couldn't. At the Morrison farm, Jack spent almost an hour. Walked the perimeter of the house 3 times, went inside, moved through the rooms slow and careful, seeing things Billy hadn't seen, reading a story in the blood and destruction. When he came back out, his face was harder, colder. The male fought well. 7 shots, all of them hit based on the blood patterns. Wounded at least 2 of them. Didn't stop them but slowed them down. Gave his family time to escape. How can you tell there's more than one? Track patterns, claw marks at different heights, different angles. Blood from at least 3 separate individuals based on placement. And the coordination. One drew his fire while the others circled. That's pack behavior. Wolves do it. So do werewolves. Billy felt sick. 3. You're certain? At least 3. Could be more, but I doubt it. 3 is a family unit, brothers probably. Brothers? The curse runs in bloodlines. If one member of a family is infected, usually others are too, especially siblings. Jack looked at the mountains surrounding them. You got any families in town with 3 brothers? Especially families with history? Old families? Billy's mind immediately went to the Garretts. Michael, Daniel, Thomas. Their great-grandfather from the old country. Mary Blackwood's warnings. Yeah, the Garrett brothers. Tell me about them. Billy did. Explained about Michael the doctor, Daniel the mechanic, Thomas the veteran. Told him what Mary Blackwood had said about curses and bloodlines, about 7th sons and old country stories. Jack listened without interrupting. When Billy finished, Jack nodded once like he'd expected it. I need to meet them, all 3. Today, if possible. You think they're the ones? I think they're worth investigating. If they're not guilty, I'll look elsewhere. But 90% of werewolf cases I work, it's someone local, someone integrated in the community, someone nobody would suspect. They spent the afternoon doing interviews. Jack's approach was casual, friendly even, asking questions that seemed random but Billy could tell had purpose. He was testing them, watching their reactions, reading signs Billy couldn't see. Doctor. Michael Garrett was at his clinic on Main Street, a small practice in a converted house. waiting room with outdated magazines and a fish tank that needed cleaning. He was finishing up with old Mrs. Henderson, writing her a prescription for her blood pressure, when Billy and Jack walked in. Michael was handsome in that dignified way some men age into, late 40s with silver threading through dark hair, clean-shaven, well-dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt under his white coat. He'd been the town doctor for 15 years, delivered most of the babies, treated everything from colds to heart attacks, saved more lives than Billy could count. But when he shook Jack's hand, Billy noticed things he'd missed before. The way Michael's hands trembled slightly, the sweat on his forehead despite the cool air, the dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days, the way he kept glancing at the windows, at the door, like he expected something to come through. "Terrible business," Michael said, sitting behind his desk trying to project authority but failing. "Poor Tom, poor Sarah. I've been treating half the town for anxiety, can barely keep up with prescriptions." "You feeling all right, doctor?" Jack asked, tone friendly but eyes sharp. "You look tired." "Haven't been sleeping well, nightmares." "I'm sure it's the stress." "What kind of nightmares?" Michael paused, hands clasped on his desk. "Just bad dreams. Running through the woods, being chased. The usual anxiety manifestations." "Any injuries lately? Accidents?" Michael looked at his hands, at the bandage wrapped around his left palm. "Cut myself on some equipment last week. Clumsy of me." "Mind if I take a look?" Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition of danger. But he unwrapped the bandage slowly, revealing the wound beneath. Billy had seen a lot of cuts in his career. This one was wrong. The edges were too neat, too straight, like it had been made by something sharp and precise. And it was healing wrong. Edges raised and pink, like something unnatural was fighting the healing process, trying to close it but not quite succeeding. "That looks infected," said Jack. "You're a doctor. You should know better than to let a cut get like that." "It's fine. I've been treating it." "Doesn't look fine. Looks like it's not healing. Looks like maybe it was made by something silver." The temperature in the room dropped. Michael went very still, face pale, and for just a second Billy saw something in his eyes that wasn't human. A flash of yellow, of rage, of something wild and trapped. "I don't know what you're implying, Mr. Holden." "I'm not implying anything, just making observations." Jack stood, casual, but Billy could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thanks for your time, doctor. Take care of that hand." They left him there, sitting behind his desk, staring at his bandaged palm like it belonged to someone else. In the cruiser, Billy looked at Jack. "You think it's him?" "Maybe. Or maybe he's just guilty about something else. Can't tell yet. Let's see the others." Daniel Garrett's auto shop was on the edge of town, a cinder-block building with 3 bays and a small office that smelled like oil and metal and old coffee. The sign out front said, "Garrett's Garage, Esther 1987, in faded red letters. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a couple cars waiting for work and Daniel's own pickup, a Ford F-150 that had seen better days but ran like a dream because Daniel kept it maintained like his life depended on it. They found him under a truck in the first bay, only his legs visible, tools scattered around him, radio playing classic rock low in the background. When Billy called his name, he rolled out on a creeper, face streaked with grease, hands black with motor oil up to his elbows. Daniel was the middle brother, stockier than Michael, broader in the shoulders, rougher around the edges. He'd never left Crow's Hollow, never wanted to. The shop was his life, had been since he'd taken it over from his father 30 years ago. He worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week, kept every truck and tractor and car in the county running. "Sheriff," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that just smeared the grease around. "What can I do for you?" "This is Jack Holden. He's helping with the investigation into the attacks." Daniel looked at Jack, and something passed between them, some recognition Billy couldn't quite identify, like 2 predators meeting, assessing each other, deciding if the other was threat or prey. "Investigation into what?" "Thought it was animal attacks." Just covering all bases, said Jack. You been working a lot lately? Always work a lot. Keeps me busy. Keeps my mind off things. What kind of things? Daniel shrugged, dropped the rag, picked up a wrench. Same things everyone's thinking about. The deaths. The fear. Wondering what's next. Jack walked around the shop, looking at tools hanging on pegboards, at the calendar on the wall marked with appointments in Daniel's blocky handwriting. You ever work nights? Sometimes. When there's a rush job or someone breaks down, needs their vehicle by morning. You worked the night Tom Richardson died. Daniel's jaw tightened, muscles bunching. I was home, asleep like most normal people at 3 in the morning. Anyone confirm that? I live alone, Mr. Holden. Nobody to confirm anything. But I didn't kill nobody, if that's what you're asking. I didn't ask if you killed anyone, I just asked where you were. Daniel stepped closer, wrench still in his hand, grease staining his shirt. What exactly are you investigating? Because if you're accusing me of something, you should just say it straight. Billy moved to step between them, but Jack waved him off. I'm not accusing anyone. Just trying to establish timelines. You understand? I understand you're asking questions that sound like accusations. Then maybe you've got something to hide. They stared at each other, tension thick enough to cut. Then Daniel laughed, bitter and harsh. Everyone's got something to hide, mister. Holden, question is what you're hiding. Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Thanks for your time. They left Daniel standing in his shop, wrench in hand, watching them go with eyes that held too much anger. That one's dangerous, said Jack when they were back in the cruiser. All 3 of them are good men, said Billy, defensive despite himself. Good men can be monsters, Sheriff. Curse doesn't care about character. They found Thomas Garrett at his trailer on the outskirts of town, past where the paved roads ended, and everything turned to dirt and gravel. The trailer was old, a single wide from the 70s, but it was clean and well-maintained, surrounded by stacks of split firewood that reached higher than the roof. Thomas was out back chopping more wood, axe rising and falling in steady rhythm, splitting logs with precision that came from muscle memory and nothing else. The pile was enormous, cords and cords of wood stacked neat and tight, more than anyone could burn in 5 winters. He didn't stop when Billy and Jack walked up, just kept chopping, mechanical, like he was trying to outrun something that couldn't be escaped. Thomas, Billy called over the sound of axe hitting wood. The axe came down one more time, split the log clean. Thomas set it aside, planted the axe in the stump, turned to face them. Thomas was the youngest brother, late 30s, lean and hard from military service and hard living after. He'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan, infantry, saw combat more times than he'd ever admit to, came back with medals he kept in a box in his closet, and nightmares he wore on his face every morning. He'd been back for 6 years now, worked construction when he could focus, lived alone in this trailer with his dog and his woodpile and his memories. His eyes were hollow, haunted, the eyes of someone who'd seen death up close and couldn't forget it. Sheriff, who's your friend? Jack Holden. He's investigating the attacks. Thomas pulled a bandana from his back pocket, wiped sweat from his face, looked at Jack with the careful assessment of someone who'd been trained to identify threats. Find anything? Still looking, said Jack. You served overseas? 3 tours, 2nd Battalion, 504th Infantry. Came back in 2019. Rough over there? Thomas's laugh was bitter. It was war. It's always rough. You having trouble sleeping? The question hung in the air. Thomas's face went carefully blank, the expression of someone who'd learned to hide things, to keep secrets even from themselves. I haven't slept right in 6 years. Why? Nightmares? Every night. Same as every veteran. Same as everyone who's seen what war does to people. What about lately? They worse? Thomas's hands clenched, relaxed, clenched again. Maybe. Hard to tell. They're always bad. Jack stepped closer, casual but purposeful. You ever lose time? Wake up somewhere you don't remember going? What are you getting at? Just questions. No, those aren't just questions. Thomas moved forward, and Billy saw the soldier surface, the trained killer that lived under the civilian exterior. You're asking if I'm crazy, if I'm blacking out, if I'm killing people. I didn't say that. You're thinking it, I can see it. Thomas looked at Billy. I came home broken, Sheriff. I got PTSD, I got anxiety, I got all kinds of problems from what I saw and did over there. But I'm not a killer, not here, not to these people. Nobody's accusing you, said Billy, trying to calm the situation. Then what's he doing here? Thomas gestured at Jack. What's with the questions about sleeping and losing time and all that? You think I don't know what you're looking for? Jack said nothing, just watched Thomas with those dark eyes, reading something in his face that Billy couldn't see. I know what's out there, Thomas said quietly. I know what's killing people. I've seen the tracks, seen the wounds. I've seen worse in Afghanistan, seen what insurgents did to civilians. But this is different. This is something else. He looked at Jack. And I think you know what it is. Yeah, I know. Then stop wasting time asking questions and go kill it. Jack nodded slowly. That's the plan. They left Thomas there, went back to Billy's office. Jack spread out photos of the crime scenes, notes from the interviews, a map of Crow's Hollow with marks showing where each attack occurred. It's all three of them, said Jack finally, voice flat and certain. Billy felt his stomach drop, felt the world tilt. What? It's not one werewolf. It's three. The whole family, they're all cursed. That's not possible. You called me because normal explanations weren't working, Sheriff. Don't ask me for normal answers. Jack pointed at the timeline he'd drawn. Look at the attacks. First one here, on the full moon. Second one 2 days later, different location. Third one across town, same night as the second. One werewolf couldn't move that fast, couldn't cover that much ground. But three could. They're hunting together. A pack. But they're brothers. They're good men. I know, that's what makes it tragic. Jack sat down, suddenly looking as tired as he sounded. The curse doesn't care about character, Sheriff. It takes good men and turns them into monsters 3 nights a month. They probably don't even remember what they do. They wake up with blood under their fingernails and scratches they can't explain, and nightmares that aren't nightmares at all, they're memories. So what do we do? Jack met his eyes. What we have to do, what I came here to do. Kill them. Yeah, kill them. Billy wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But he'd seen the bodies, seen the destruction, seen the fear in his town, and he knew Jack was right. When? Tomorrow night, next full moon. They'll transform at moonrise, hunt till dawn. We set up in the town square, use me as bait, take them down when they come. All three at once? That's the plan. If even one escapes, they'll keep killing. This ends tomorrow, or it doesn't end at all. Billy nodded slowly, felt the weight of it settling on him, heavy and cold. What do you need from me? Keep everyone inside. Locked doors, boarded windows, no exceptions. And I need you as backup. But you stay behind cover. You only shoot if I'm down and they're coming for you. Otherwise, you let me work. Understood? Understood. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jack had equipment in his truck, rifles modified to chamber specialized ammunition, boxes of bullets he'd cast himself from pure silver melted down and blessed according to methods he didn't explain and Billy didn't ask about. He had a combat knife with a blade that gleamed strange in the light. Silver worked through the steel in patterns that looked almost like text in a language Billy didn't recognize. Silver's the only thing that kills them, Jack explained, loading rounds into magazines with practiced efficiency. Regular bullets wound them, slow them down maybe, but won't stop them. You need silver through the heart or the brain. Nothing else works. Not fire, not drowning, not decapitation, just silver in the right place. Billy had his own shotgun, the Remington 870 he'd carried for 30 years. Jack gave him shells loaded with silver buckshot, showed him how to aim, how to lead a moving target, how to shoot to kill and not wound. You hesitate. You die. They're fast, faster than you can imagine, stronger than any man, smarter than any animal, and they're coordinated, they work together, you understand? Billy understood. They set up in the town square as the sun went down, the sky turning orange and red and finally purple as night came on. The town was deserted. Everyone locked inside like Jack had ordered, windows boarded, doors barred. The only light came from a single street lamp and the rising moon, full and bright, turning everything silver and shadow. Jack positioned himself in the center of the square, rifles within easy reach, knife on his belt, looking calm and ready. Billy was 40 yards back, behind a stone planter that would provide cover, shotgun loaded and ready, hands shaking just slightly. The moon climbed higher. The temperature dropped. Jack stood still, patient, breathing slow and even, and Billy wondered how many times he'd done this, how many werewolves he'd faced, how many times he'd stood alone against monsters while towns cowered behind locked doors. At 11:47 p.m., Billy heard it, a growl, low and deep, vibrating in his chest before he actually heard it with his ears. Then another growl from a different direction, then a third. They were surrounded. The first werewolf emerged from the shadows between buildings to the north, and Billy's breath caught in his throat, because nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. It was massive, 7 feet tall, standing on bent legs, arms too long and ending in claws like knives, muscles bunching under fur that was thick and matted, and dark with old blood. The face was wrong, caught between human and wolf, jaws too wide with teeth too many, but the eyes, God, the eyes still held intelligence, still held something human trapped inside the monster, Dr. Michael Garrett, or what he'd become under the moon's light. The second werewolf appeared to the east, from the alley behind Earl's general store. This one was stockier, more muscle, moving with brute force rather than grace, claws scarring the asphalt as it walked. Daniel Garrett, no longer a mechanic, now something else entirely. The third came from the south, tactical and careful, using cover, moving like it had been trained in combat. Thomas Garrett, the soldier, the veteran, still applying military discipline even in this monstrous form. They circled Jack slowly, coordinated, pack behavior, 3 points of a triangle with him in the center. Jack turned with them, keeping all three in his line of sight, hand near his rifle, and when he spoke his voice was steady. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." The werewolves didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Whatever made them human was buried too deep now, drowned under instinct and hunger and the curse that had claimed them. Jack moved first. He grabbed the rifle in one smooth motion, spun, fired at Michael in a single fluid action born from decades of practice. The shot echoed through the square like thunder, the muzzle flash lighting up the night for a split second. The bullet caught Michael in the shoulder, silver burning where it hit, and the werewolf howled, a sound of pure agony that made Billy's teeth ache and his hands shake, and staggered back. But it didn't fall. Daniel charged, covered the distance between them in 3 impossible leaps, faster than anything that size should move, claws extended, jaws open, roaring challenge. Jack fired twice more, hitting Daniel in the chest and leg. The werewolf spun from the impacts, black blood spraying, but kept coming. Jack dove to the side, rolling, coming up firing again. Another hit, shoulder this time. Thomas joined the attack from Jack's blind side, tactical and precise. The soldier using flanking maneuvers even in beast form. Jack barely turned in time, caught movement in his peripheral vision, fired. The bullet grazed Thomas's ribs, drawing blood but not stopping him. 3 against 1. They were too fast, too coordinated, too strong. Jack was good. Billy could see that, see decades of experience in every movement, every shot, every dodge. But he was also human. He tired, he bled, he made mistakes. Michael recovered and charged again, pain making him furious, making him reckless. Jack shot him twice more, center mass, silver burning through fur and flesh and finding vital organs. Michael went down to one knee, howling, but didn't stop. Grabbed Jack's leg with one massive clawed hand, claws tearing through denim and into muscle. Jack grunted, pain forcing sound from him, and brought the rifle butt down on Michael's skull. Once. Twice. The werewolf released him. Daniel was on him before he could recover. massive clawed hand swatting the rifle aside like it was a toy, sending it spinning 20 feet away into the darkness. Jack pulled the knife, blade gleaming silver even in the shadows, and slashed upward. Caught Daniel across the chest, deep, opening a wound that bled black in the moonlight. Daniel howled and grabbed Jack, lifted him off his feet like he weighed nothing, threw him. Jack hit a parked car 15 feet away, metal denting from the impact, glass cracking. He rolled off, landed on his feet but swaying, bleeding from a dozen cuts, jacket torn, shirt beneath soaked with blood. His ribs screamed where he'd hit the car. His leg burned where Michael had clawed him, but he stayed standing. Thomas circled, patient, waiting for the perfect moment, the kill shot, using tactics learned in war and refined by instinct. Billy wanted to shoot, wanted to help. Finger on the trigger, shotgun aimed, but Jack had said to stay back unless he was down. And Jack was still fighting, still moving, still alive. Jack fumbled for his backup pistol, the snub-nosed revolver on his hip, fingers clumsy with blood and pain. Got it clear of the holster as Thomas charged. Fired 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot missed. The second caught Thomas in the shoulder. The third hit him in the throat. Thomas crashed down mid-leap, weight and momentum carrying him forward, slamming into Jack and driving them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs and blood and fur. They hit hard, Jack's head bouncing off the asphalt, stars exploding in his vision. Thomas's body pinned him, heavy and dying, black blood pouring from the throat wound, pooling on the ground. Michael stood, wounded and bleeding but still moving, and came for the final kill. Claws raised, eyes full of rage and hunger and something that might have been grief, he loomed over Jack, who was pinned and helpless and out of ammunition. Billy fired. The shotgun blast took Michael in the side, silver buckshot tearing into him, and he staggered. Billy fired again, and again, and again. Emptied the gun, hands shaking, tears streaming down his face because this was Dr. Michael Garrett, the man who'd saved his wife during a difficult birth, who'd delivered both his daughters, who'd been at his house for dinner a dozen times, who'd been a pillar of this community for 15 years. Michael fell. Silence crashed over the square like a physical thing. Billy's ears rang from the shotgun blasts. Smoke hung in the cold air. Blood everywhere, on the ground, on the cars, on Jack's torn and broken body still trapped under Thomas's corpse. Jack pushed against the dead werewolf, struggling, gasping, finally getting free. He rolled to his side, tried to stand, made it to his knees before swaying, nearly falling. Caught himself on the car, breathing hard, holding his ribs, blood seeping through his fingers. Billy came out of cover, shotgun empty, legs shaking, and crossed the square to where the 3 bodies lay. "Is it over?" His voice cracked. Jack nodded, couldn't speak yet, just nodded. As they watched, as the moon began its slow descent toward the western peaks, the transformation reversed. It was slower than Billy expected, and more terrible. Fur didn't just vanish. It receded into skin, pulling back like a tide, leaving raw pink flesh behind. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds like breaking branches, joints popping as they shifted from one shape to another. Claws became fingernails, shedding layers of keratin that fell like dead leaves. Jaws shortened, teeth fell out in a shower of white, replaced by human teeth that pushed up through bleeding gums. The whole process took maybe 3 minutes that felt like hours, accompanied by sounds that weren't quite animal or human, but something caught between, sounds of transformation and death mixing together. When it was done, 3 men lay where 3 monsters had been. Dr. Michael Garrett, wearing the pajamas he'd put on before bed, before the moon rose and changed him, face peaceful in death like the curse had been lifted along with his life. Daniel Garrett, still in his work coveralls, the ones he never seemed to take off, hands stained with motor oil that mixed with his blood to form patterns on the asphalt. Thomas Garrett, wearing his old combat fatigues, the ones he'd brought back from Afghanistan, dog tags glinting in the streetlight, catching the moon. The town emerged slowly. First a few faces at windows, pale and frightened, watching to see if it was truly over. Then doors opening, cautious, ready to slam shut again at the first sign of danger. Then people stepping out into the street, gathering in small groups, whispering, pointing, moving closer. They gathered around the square, formed a circle around the bodies, around Jack and Billy, and nobody spoke. What was there to say? These had been their men. The doctor who'd healed them, the mechanic who'd kept their vehicles running, the soldier who'd served his country. These had been good men. Cursed men, killers, victims. All of it true at the same time. Mary Blackwood was there, tears streaming down her weathered face, and she whispered words in a language Billy didn't recognize. Might have been prayers, might have been apologies, might have been both. The mayor came, looking old and shaken. Reverend Stone came, clutching his Bible like a shield, face pale. Families, friends, neighbors, all of them coming to see, to understand, to grieve. Billy found his voice first, forced words past the lump in his throat. We need to do this right. They deserve proper burial. They deserve respect. They were good men who got dealt a bad hand. They deserve respect, finished Jack. He was leaning against the car, holding his ribs, blood still seeping through his fingers, but his voice was firm. They deserve respect. They deserve to be remembered for who they were, not what they became. Reverend Stone stepped forward. I'll arrange the service. They'll be buried in the town cemetery with full honors. Thank you, said Billy, and meant it. They buried the Garrett brothers 3 days later, after the medical examiner had released the bodies, after the state police had finished their investigation, after the town had time to process what had happened. The funeral was on a cold Saturday morning, sky gray and low, threatening rain that never quite came. The cemetery was on a hill overlooking Crow's Hollow, surrounded by iron fencing installed in 1891, filled with graves that went back to the town's founding. Old markers, weathered stones, names worn away by time and weather. The Garrett plot was in the northeast corner, family graves going back 4 generations, and they'd make room for 3 more. The whole town came. They filled the cemetery and spilled out onto the hillside. Hundreds of people come to pay respects, to mourn, to say goodbye. Dr. Michael had no immediate family, but half the town owed him their lives or their children's lives or their health. Daniel's ex-wife came, a woman he'd divorced 5 years ago but who still cried over his grave. Thomas's old unit sent representatives, soldiers in dress uniforms, carrying flags and standing at attention. Reverend Stone gave the service, spoke about good men facing trials beyond their control, about grace and forgiveness, about how sometimes the greatest battles are the ones fought inside ourselves. He talked about Michael's dedication to healing, about Daniel's honest work, about Thomas's service and sacrifice. He didn't mention werewolves, didn't mention curses. Just talked about 3 brothers who'd tried their best and lost to something beyond their control. Jack attended. He stood at the very back, separated from the crowd, hat in his hands, battered and bruised but upright. He'd refused the hospital, patched himself up instead with supplies from his truck, told Billy he'd had worse, and Billy believed him, even though it made him sad to believe it. His ribs were wrapped tight, his leg bandaged, arm in a makeshift sling. But he stood straight, paid his respects, honored the dead. After everyone left, after the cemetery was empty except for the graves and the wind through the trees and the sound of dirt being shoveled onto coffins, Jack stayed. Billy stayed with him. They stood by the 3 fresh graves marked with simple stones. Just names and dates, because what else could you say? You didn't have to help bury them, said Billy. Jack looked at the stones, at the names carved clean and clear. Yeah, I did. They weren't evil, they were cursed, big difference. Will people remember that? No. People remember fear. They'll remember the attacks, the deaths, the terror. In 10 years, this'll be a ghost story to scare kids. The legend of the werewolves of Crow's Hollow. Jack turned away from the graves, looked down at the town spread out below. But that's okay. At least it's over. What about you? Where do you go now? Jack pulled keys from his pocket, looked toward where his truck was parked at the cemetery gate. Somewhere else, somewhere there's another town with another problem. It's what I do. The town wants to pay you. We took up a collection. $3,000. Jack shook his head. Don't need payment. Just cover my gas and the ammunition I used, that's enough. Billy had expected that answer, but tried anyway. Jack, you saved this town, saved lives. You deserve to be compensated for— I killed 3 people who didn't want to be monsters, interrupted Jack, voice flat and hard. I did what needed doing, that's all. Don't make it more than it is. He walked toward his truck, limping slightly, moving like everything hurt because it probably did. Billy followed him down the hill, watched as Jack loaded his equipment, his weapons, his books. Everything packed efficient and quick, practiced from doing it 100 times before. You ever get tired of this? Asked Billy. Ever want to stop? Jack paused, hand on the truck door, looked back at the 3 graves on the hill, at the town beyond, at the mountains surrounding everything. Every day, he said quietly. Every single day. Then why keep going? Because nobody else will. Jack climbed into the truck, started the engine. It coughed, caught, settled into its familiar rough rumble. Take care of your town, Sheriff. Remember the good things about those men. They deserve that much. What about Katie, my niece? Did you— Billy swallowed hard. Did you find out what happened to her? Jack's face went grim, hard lines deepening around his eyes and mouth. Found her phone in the woods near Thomas's trailer, and her shoe. Just one shoe, covered in dirt and blood. The rest— He stopped, looked away. The rest is better left alone, Sheriff. Just know she didn't suffer long. If that helps. It didn't help. But Billy nodded anyway, because what else could he do? Jack drove away as dawn broke over the mountains, truck disappearing down the winding road, engine sound fading until there was only silence and morning birds and the wind through the pine trees. Crow's Hollow would recover. It took time, but towns always did. People repaired the Morrison farmhouse, eventually sold it to a young couple from Charleston looking for country life. Someone took over the medical clinic, a doctor from Wheeling, older man, not as good as Michael, but competent. The auto shop reopened under new management, Daniel's nephew from Pennsylvania, who moved his family to Crow's Hollow and learned the business. Thomas's trailer was eventually torn down, the land sold, someone built a new house there. Life continued because that's what life does, even after monsters, even after curses, even after good men become killers and heroes have to do terrible things to save the innocent. But some scars don't heal. Billy Maddox served another 5 years as sheriff before retiring, turned over the badge to Deputy Harris, who'd learned hard lessons about what could hide in the darkness. Linda Richardson never remarried, raised her boys alone, moved away eventually to Richmond where memories weren't on every street corner. Ann Morrison and her daughters stayed in town, found ways to live with grief, planted a garden where Joseph had died and grew flowers every spring in his memory. And on full moon nights, when the fog rolled down from the peaks and the wind howled through the valley like voices of the dead, people locked their doors and remembered. Remembered when death walked their streets, remembered when 3 good men became monsters, remembered when a stranger came and did what needed doing, no matter the cost. Billy stood at his office window those nights, even after retirement, watching the moon rise, thinking about Jack Holden driving endless roads to endless towns with endless problems. Thought about the weight of carrying 53 dead werewolves on one man's conscience. Thought about the loneliness of being the only one willing to do the work nobody else could stomach. Thought about how many towns there must be, scattered across America, with stories just like this one, with graves marked by simple stones and questions nobody wanted to answer. Thank you, he whispered to the empty night, knowing Jack couldn't hear but saying it anyway. Thank you for doing what we couldn't. Somewhere out there, on some dark highway cutting through some nameless forest, Jack Holden was driving. Radio playing low, windows down, breathing in the night air. Headed toward the next town, the next call, the next monster that needed killing. The road stretched endless ahead, and there was always another werewolf, another curse, Another family torn apart by something they couldn't control. That's what hunters did. They hunted. They killed. They moved on. They carried the weight so others didn't have to. They walked alone through a world where monsters were real, and someone had to stop them. And the legend continued, whispered in small towns and dark places, passed from sheriff to sheriff, from survivor to survivor. The legend of a man named Jack who faced what others feared, who carried the burden of necessary evil, who walked alone through darkness so others could live in light. The legend of the hunter. It would continue long after Jack Holden was gone, long after Crow's Hollow was forgotten, long after the last person who remembered the Garrett brothers had died. Because legends don't die. They just change, adapt, grow with each telling. And somewhere, always, there would be another Jack, another hunter, another person willing to do what needed doing when monsters came calling. The legend continued. It always did. It always would. Did you stay until the end? Tell me what caught your attention most in this story. Tell me if you liked it. Leave a like, and until next time,